how Labor can get some traction in this federal election year. Well, they've set the education battle lines for the campaign by committing to fund the final 2 years of the Gonski school education changes. Yes, Gonski will just not go away. The package includes $4.5 billion to fully fund the school education changes for the final 2 years, 2018-19. The federal government, you might recall, has not committed to Gonski funding for those years. It's instead promised to negotiate a new deal with state and territories, the details of which, of course, are a little bit cloudy. The coalition has questioned how Labor would pay for this, and that question did spring to my mind as well. But Maurie Mulheron is the president of the New South Wales Teachers Federation. Maurie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bill.
What are your thoughts on the shortened plans?
Look, we welcome the announcement. We believe that it does show national leadership in committing to an investment in our children's future, and we're calling, of course, on Mr Turnbull to either better or at least to match the announcement. We're kind of sick and tired of schools funding constantly being a political football between the major political parties. We want to ascend above that and for both parties to commit to it.
Does it bother you, though, the question of money and where it's coming from?
Look, if you see education as a cost, it might bother you. But if you see it like other OECD nations do as an actual investment, then it shouldn't bother you. I mean, what's more important than investing in human capital, in our children's future, in the economy of your nation? And we know that one of the most recent OECD reports show that those countries that do not invest in education will fall behind in development. We also know that those countries that have a widening gap between the advantage and the disadvantage in terms of educational outcomes also suffer. And that's where Australia is at the moment. We are not doing that. So this is an investment not just in an individual child or community. It's actually a national investment for the future.
I understand that totally, and I think most parents would, at least. And you mentioned in an earlier release today that, for example, basic maths skills should be better funded. But when it comes to basic numeracy and literacy, why does that need more money? I would have thought that should be just a given as part of the system we have now. Why can't we do that without more money?
We've underinvested, Bill, for too long, and what's happened is that there are many children who may have, say, physical, intellectual disabilities, who may come from a very impoverished background, who don't have the kind of resources that other families do. Those kids need additional support, and there are many parents who have children with very serious learning needs. It's no fault of anybody, but it's just an actual reality. We know there's about 100,000 kids in Australia who have got disabilities and are not getting any funding support whatsoever. This Gonski money is going to those kids. You know, there's an example of a child in Western Sydney who was almost unable to form full sentences because of speech impediment. The school used Gonski money to employ a speech therapist to work with the teacher and the child. That child now is speaking to his mother in full sentences for the first time in 6 years since the child began to speak. So these are really important and powerful stories that we have. We know it's working in schools, and we know that we haven't invested in education. Indeed, from 2000 to 2013, less than 1% investment in education, yet the economy grew much larger than that. It's only been since Gonski was introduced in 2014 there's been a significant investment, but we can't have those programs truncated or abandoned by 2017. They've got to continue into the future.
I understand the signature of Gonski in this time has really been that, and that is funneling money to where it's needed most,
Yes.
rather than just blanket approaches. And as you say, supporting disadvantaged students. I'd find it hard to believe anyone would argue with that, but of course the Gonski reforms go much broader than that. They're much more detailed, far too detailed to go into now. But what do you say to the critics of these reforms still? I mean, are there areas where Gonski could be adopted in principle, but certain other parts of it that aren't necessarily as important trimmed in order to make it fit the budgetary requirements?
Look, I think that the Gonski model, it came after over 7,000 submissions, an exhaustive study that David Gonski, the business leader, conducted. And there were both conservatives and people on that panel. It was a pretty fair and independent panel. And it came up with recommendations. And I believe that the model is a very sound model because it basically said, regardless of what's type of school system you choose to send your child to, whether it be a public school, independent, Catholic, regardless of whether you live in the metropolitan area or the rural area, no matter where you are, if there are children in a particular school that need additional support, then they should attract additional money. And I don't think you can get any fairer than that. It's sector blind. And so every school, and it could even be in a quite a wealthy area, if there are children with disabilities that need extra support, they will get it. And it's particularly important that we support it. There is no other model around that is as fair, that has achieved the consensus right across the education community in all sectors as the Gonski Model did. And we need to actually now, as a nation, embrace it and fully fund it and put to rest once and for all this running battle about schools funding. Let's be as mature as we can as a nation to say, look, we can rise above party politics and fund our kids' needs. I mean, surely politicians can at least do that, put that as a settled matter.
We'll find out soon enough, because the ball is certainly in the federal government's court. Maurie Mulheron, from the President of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.